Cooling fan, which you won't need to worry about. High flow oxygen, you just pop it straight into the oxygen outlet. Everything else on the bottom I wouldn't worry about. You can update over the internet eventually. You've got an Ethernet port if you want to, an RS-232 port if you want to connect to central monitoring. Would you do that for NIV, or you always do it in resus?
Yeah.
Always in resus. So it's always one-on-one. So we didn't used to do that either. You've got a battery, it's 6 hours, definitely, probably a little bit more depending on what your pressures are. The filter is just here. This is where you're in training, obviously your air to mix in with your oxygen. The filter can only go in one way. It probably needs to be changed every 3 months. It'll depend on your use. I used to change it if we had a particularly infectious patient, just because you're within a metre of the patient and you're sucking air in. You don't have to, it doesn't say it in the manual, but I would just do that. They're cheap, and you'll get a bunch of them with your purchase. So I would just have that as part of your resus check.
But does that filter virus, does it? It's just dust filter, isn't it?
And it's a normal filter, so a bacterial viral, isn't it? Yeah. The one at the back though, the cooling fan one, that is just a dust filter. So you can move the arm for your circuit on either side depending on which side you're nursing your patient on. Now this is colour touch screen, a navigation ring with an enter port or an enter button. So that's sort of like your old iPod. I don't ever use it because I didn't ever have one, but it's there as an option. On and off button at the front. Battery light. When it's not on, then you're using your battery. When it's flashing, it's charging. When it's on, then it's completely charged. And then you've got an alarm LED. So circuit-wise, we suggest that you use a passive circuit. This can be a humidified. Would you use humidification?
I was just saying, probably, like they're going to loan us a humidifier, and if
fantastic.
And I was actually just seeing what you're suggesting, whether we should. And if
look, not many emergency departments do it, but I think that we're moving towards that anyway. So if you get it in, and when you get the new device and get people used to it, it'll make such a difference to your patient.
It's probably better to do it from the start. If
yeah,
we're
I
educating
agree.
About this, just
cold, dry oxygen. It's 27 degrees. You know, it's not. It's a lot more work for your patient that's already sick. Yeah. If they've got lots of secretions, then you just turn them into cement, really. So if you want to get the best from your machine and get your patients up and about as quickly as possible, I would use humidification. We didn't, we were cheap at Canberra. But partly that was because we weren't used to humidification as well, so the nursing staff were really worried about it.
We've been doing, they're familiar with the humidifiers now.
Fantastic.
So I think we should probably just...
Yeah, and they're easy. The setup is still very, very easy.
A bit more money.
So the circuits that you'll buy will already have the filter attached. Filter always goes to the machine. And then you've got your proximal pressure line that just slips on. And I'll just use a test line. So this is your exhalation port here as well, just to let you know. Some people like to cover it up when they find a little leak. On and off. And the machine takes a couple of seconds to warm up, and that just goes through a number of self-checks, so you don't have to do an enormous check on the machine. If it turns on without any alarms, then it's good to go. So when you I might turn this light off. When you turn it on, the machine will tell you a couple of things. It will tell us that we're running on an internal battery. And that you're using a mask with a size 1 exhalation, size 1 leak, sorry, and an exhalation port that's a disposable exhalation port. On your masks, now this one is a very old one, so on your masks you'll always have a number on it. So it says number 1 there, small, medium, large, and this is predominantly what you'll use, the oral nasal mask will all be a number 1. And then if you wanted to get a full face mask, so these are for people with beards, funny shaped faces, claustrophobic patients really like this, children really like this as well. That would usually have a number 2 on it. So all you do is tell the machine by going to menu, mask and port, and then you just decide whatever you want to use. So we'll leave it on number 1. If there was a disaster and you needed to use this as an invasive ventilator with pressure, then you can do that too, just swap it over to ET tracking. So you'll have your number 2 for your full face masks, and 3 and 4 will be for masks that are sort of down the track. If you decide to use another brand, then you will just go to other. So we'll leave it on number 1, and then it will ask you what exhalation port you're using. So that's a disposable exhalation port. There's a picture of it in case you forget what it looks like. It doesn't look like a PEV, which is a disc, or it doesn't look like a whisper swivel. So we'll just leave it on DEP. You shouldn't need to change that if you're using the same circuit mask all the time. So as long as we're happy with that.
So do they just get set as default? Like
there's no default. Whatever you plug in, when you turn it on next time, that's what it will go back to.
Okay.
But you shouldn't really need to change that at all. So this is just a low level alarm. We'll just reset that because it's not important to us. And then these are messages. So you can have, a number of alarms that will stay out there. If you don't want them showing, you can just press this and it parks it away. So up the top, this is your patient information. You've got an alarm silence key. Every time you press that, you'll have 2 minutes of alarm silence. Then you had your alarm reset key that you just saw. Just say I set off an alarm. So that we would have got a noise if I had waited a little bit longer. But patient disconnect, now that alarm isn't active anymore, there's a line through it to say it doesn't matter. You can just reset it and it will just take it away. So this top section, this is what we call our breath bar. When a patient takes a breath spontaneously, you'll see that that's turquoise. Up here is turquoise. When they breathe out, it's blue. If the machine is delivering a breath, then you'll see that is an orange in the inhalation phase. Breath rate, tidal volume, minute bent, peak inspiratory pressure, that's what the patient is achieving. Just make sure that that's the same as what you've set your IPAP at. If it's not, we'll talk about a couple of reasons why. Now this will be the biggest change for everybody, especially if you're using an Avita or Oxylog, is that now we want there to be a leak. The patient's going to lose some of their CO2 around the mask, and the machines are designed for that, so they'll just bring up the bias flow to match the leak. You've told the machine what you should expect the leak to be by telling it what number on the mask and what exhalation port you've got. So we want a leak now between 7 to 25 litres. I just tell people to choose a number, like aim for 10. But if you have no leak, then your patient might start to retain CO2. If your leak is too high, and the machine will cope very well up to 60 litres, but if it goes above 25, just start to readjust your mask. Patient trigger, that's how many breaths your patient's triggering by themselves. Really for NIV in an ED, you want that, in the very high 90s. This is your IE ratio, but expressed as a percentage. So you don't have any control over that, the patient will. I usually will just use it as a sort of a baseline. If that's getting higher, then the patient's spending obviously more time in that inspiratory phase. Just think about why. Is it because they're working harder? Is it because you've started to solve their problems and it's easier for them, so they're spending more time in that phase? If this is getting smaller, they're moving more to the respiratory rest side of things. Now you've got really good graphics. This is the first time that a non-invasive ventilator has had great graphics. So pressure, flow and volume. This little button will just change the graph to best fit of the screen. This little button will change your time. So we've got 12 seconds, 24, 3 or 6. I just used to leave it on 12 because that's what I knew. So really, you can really see how your patient is synchronising with the machine and whether or not they're hitting their pressures. The top ... will represent what you've set your IPAP at. The bottom ... will represent what you've set your EPAP at. And then the graph for flow is what your patient's doing. So you can see whether or not your patient is hitting the IPAP and that they're coming back down to baseline. If they're not, then they're gas trapping, and you can bring the EPAP up to match, what your patient's doing. If you want to double check, you can press pause. See this little grey line? That will just do a sweep of the whole screen, and then the machine graph will pause, and the machine continues on in the background. Now you've got a red line that you can move by touch, or you can move it with this thing. Wherever it intersects on that graph, you'll get a little number over here. So you can see I'm in the inspiratory phase. I've got 12, my IPAP is 12. I know that my patient is doing exactly what I've told it to do. If I move it down to the expiratory phase, it's 6, my EPAP is 6, then I'm very happy that my patient is achieving the pressure support that I've set. If you're happy with that, you can just press play. So I would say to the nursing staff, this is a running average, and it's an average of the last 6 breaths. If they want to get in real time pressure reading, then just tell them to press pause. So have that as their hourly observation. Don't have this as your hourly observation, because that's just what you've set the machine at. Yeah. So that's pressure, flow and volume. So, you know, we can go into that a lot more as you get used to the machine, how you can use your graphics to synchronise with your patient. But, you know, for example, with your volume, if you thought your patient was gas trapping or breath stacking, you'd obviously see quite a large tidal volume, a smaller tidal volume, a smaller tidal volume, a smaller tidal volume, and then a big one again. So it will just give you more information about your patient.
With the rate, like so will it always, like if this person's breathing up in like, 28 instead of 30, will it always deliver a 12? Or is it only when they become
This is exactly what the patient's doing. So if they started breathing, then my breath rate will go up. You can set a backup breath rate.
So there's a 12 down the bottom there.
Yeah, so that's your backup breath rate at the moment.
If they stop, or like if they...
Yeah, if they don't take a breath every 5 seconds, then the machine will then deliver them a breath. You can set that from as low as 4 to as high as 40, I think. I can't remember.
So we're at the moment have like a 20-second apneic period if they don't breathe for 20 seconds. So it kicks in. Yeah. But this is if they have got like 12
so
in
maybe
an hour
if you set that down to 4, and that's how we used to do it. We'd have it set at the lowest possible rate we could, and set my low breath rate alarm above that, and then let the patient breathe above that. So by the time they start to reduce their breath rate, you've got an alarm, and then you can decide, am I happy with that, the way that they're breathing, and reduce that alarm again, or, start to think about a plan B. Yeah, we didn't ever have that set particularly high. It will just depend. Some people are using this post-operatively, so they'll want to deliver a few extra breaths to their patient as they're emerging from their anaesthesia, or sometimes we would use it while we were palliating a patient and waiting for their family to come in. So, I'll just cancel that one. So the next section, this will tell you what mode you're in. Spontaneous timed is BiPAP. That's probably another big change, and it's just because BiPAP is a trade name. So any Phillips Respironics devices will have ST as their BiPAP. So we're currently in ST. Now these are your settings. So what would you usually start your BiPAP on? Do you have favourites? Like a 10 and a 5, a 12 and a 7?
5 and 10 or the
so,
probably baseline.
Yeah, I'll just get you to change it. All you do is touch it and then just go up and down. So then up and down and then accept. Keep up. Beautiful. You can if you wanted to, you can use that as well.
So the numbers just mean exactly the same thing?
Yeah. Just as usual. Yeah. Except for you might have been used to putting in your PEEP and then pressure support above PEEP. So if you're doing a 5 and a 10 then, that would be a 5 and a 15. Yeah.
So with that we'd go, so we wouldn't do that with this. We would, if we were...
This is your setting your iPad. What's happening? Yeah, does that make sense?
So we'd go 15 or we'd stay at 10? And
so at the moment
be above 5 anyway?
At the moment you've only got 5 centimetres of pressure support.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's iPad minus EPAP. If you wanted a higher number, more pressure support. We sort of, we say start low, move up 2 centimetres at a time. It depends on, what you're trying to achieve. If you want to blow off their CO2, increase their pressure support. If you want to increase their oxygenation, then you're bringing up your PEEP. So they're your numbers. That's your backup breath rate that we had a bit of a chat about. We used to set that quite low. I'll just leave it on 12 just so that it's going in the background at the moment. Now your eye time will only come into play if the machine delivers a breath. So other than that, the patient will control how long they breathe in for and how long they breathe out for. You can set it at however you want to, or 1 to 2, or just play with it. Tells you here, so you don't have to work it out with the with your maths. Rise time. Now, rise time is the same as your ramp on your oxylog. So it's the time it takes to get from your EPAP to your IPAP, how quickly you deliver that flow of gas. And for me, that's one of my favourite settings and made such a big difference to how well a patient will tolerate NIV. Between 2 and 3 is pretty stock standard for us. If it was somebody who's really flow starved, like an asthmatic patient, then put it up to a fast rise time. That's number 1. I just remember that as number 1, winning the race. That's as fast as you can go. And I'll just show you up here.
That's not seconds, is it?
It's 1/10 of a second, loosely. It takes, 1/10 of a second to get up from your EPAP to your IPAP. So you can see here that flow is much sharper. If you slow it down, so number 1 for an asthmatic, anyone who's saying I can't breathe, get this thing off me, they want a fast rise time. Anyone who's saying there's too much pressure, they want a slower rise time, and I'll just show you what that does to the graph. So see how that's a much more gentle delivery of flow? Now if we had that on for us at the moment, it'd be really uncomfortable. It would feel like the flow is not matching our own rise time. So we'd be uncomfortable and we'd want to take it off. So if at the start while people are getting used to it, you leave it on a 2 or a 3, but I ask the patients, how do you feel, is this comfortable? And they'll tell you, or most of them will. And now this ramp is a little bit more like the ramp that patients will have at home for sleep apnea. So they'll usually set their pressures and then the machine will slowly build up while the patient falls asleep. So you can set that ramp from 5 to 45 minutes. Where I used to work, we didn't use ramp at all. By the time our patients got to us, they were so sick that they needed the pressures that we had set. In saying that, Prince of Wales, they'll ramp for 5 minutes on every single one of their patients, and it's just by way of getting the patient used to the therapy. So if you started, just say you had it at 15 minutes, it will start at pressures of 4 and 6 and then slowly build up to that 10 and 5 over 15 minutes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so you don't have to do it manually?
No. Yeah, so it's nice. So if it's somebody that you know and love that comes in quite often and you know they require high pressures, then you could have them set it there 10 and 20 and just build it up for them over 15 minutes, and it's much more comfortable for them if you've got that luxury of time. If you have your sleep apnea patients that forget their machines, which inevitably they do, then you can use this as well. And then just say you put it on and then you realise that your patient really needed those pressures that you wanted them to have immediately, just press it again and turn it off. Just say end ramp. EPAP is your expiratory pressure or your PEEP, and then your oxygen. Once you're plugged into your high flow oxygen, then you just dial it up to whatever you want. We'll just leave it on 21% or otherwise it will keep alarming. That's quite nice to know if you are transferring somebody and you do run out of oxygen. Just tell whoever's transferring, just go back to room air, get to where you're going, and then pop them back on the oxygen upstairs or wherever they're going. We can go to alarms. So your alarms are like your normal alarms. You've got your high breath rate and your low breath rate. Usually I would set that 10 above what the patient's achieving and 10 below what the patient is achieving. Just remember, at the moment we've got that backup breath rate set at 12. We've got our low breath rate set at 5, so it's never ever going to go off because the machine is always going to deliver those 12 breaths. So if you want that to be effective, you have to set it above your backup breath rate. We won't do that, otherwise it will keep alarming. So high and low, high tidal volume and low tidal volume, I usually set it a couple of 100 mils above what your patient is achieving and a couple of 100 mils below. But just wait for a little bit. If your patient's really labile, just let them settle into the therapy first and then set that. Your hip, your lip and your lip T are all to do with your inspiratory pressure. So high inspiratory pressure set at 5 above what you've set your IPAP at. Low inspiratory 5 below if you can, or set it in between your IPAP and EPAP. Your low inspiratory pressure timed. It's a nice alarm, it's nice for nurses. As your patient sort of settles into the therapy a bit more, then you might be happy that they take off their mask and have a tablet or have a drink, and it will be 20 seconds at the moment until the alarm goes off. If it's somebody who keeps fiddling with their mask, then you might just turn it off or down to 5 seconds. So as soon as they take it off, the machine will alarm. Then you've got your low minute bent as well. So I guess that's a big change as well for nursing staff. They hate the alarms on this thing. But just remind them it's the same as if you're just setting your normal monitor alarms, that you have to wrap it around each individual patient. Someone's got high blood pressure and they're tachycardic, then you adjust your monitor alarms for that as well. You have to do this for this machine as well. And remember, it goes back to whatever you had it previously set at. So, you know, that's why you have to do it for every patient. Modes, your other most common one. Do you use CPAP much anymore? Not as much.
I do sometimes.
Yeah, if it's a straight pulmonary edema, yeah, if it was a flash one and they got in quite quickly, then that might be enough for your patient. You might not want to blow off any of their CO2. Usually the patients are elderly, they've got lots of comorbidities, so they don't mind a little bit of that inspiratory assistance as well. But CPAPs, it's the same thing. Currently, when we're in this brown screen, we're in what we call a batch change, so you can make a bunch of changes all at once. So you might start off on 7. You've got your same ramp, which is, you know, building slowly up over a period of time that you tell the machine about. Then the new feature on this one is something called C-flex. If you can imagine somebody on CPAP, the worst part for them when they're on this therapy is as they try and breathe out against a pressure. You can dip the pressure just as they breathe out. It comes back up to baseline by the time they've finished exhaling. It's just a comfort feature. Makes a massive difference if you're using high pressures, like pressures above 10. Enormous. It'll mean the patient will keep their therapy on, whereas before they would have just been saying, get this thing off me, I can't breathe. So that's your C-flex. It will just show you the biggest dip is 3, 2 or 1. It sort of correlates to about a 1 centimetre dip in pressure. I'll just show you what it looks like on the graph. I might put that up to 10. So now obviously the machine can't deliver any backup breaths because it's a 1 pressure. You'll see up here that this has got, I've got that ramp on, I'll just turn that off. You'll see that our ... dots now have, there's only 1, because there's only 1 line. When the patient breathes in, it's turquoise. As the patient begins to breathe out, we're just dipping that a little bit and then it comes back up to baseline by the time the patient's finished exhaling. Does that make sense? It's a nice comfort feature, a really nice comfort feature. Now I'll just pop it back to spontaneous time so it can just continue in the background. So that's your CPAP mode. You've got another one called PCV, which is pressure controlled ventilation. Now that's exactly like BiPAP, but now you control the time spent in inspiration for every single breath. Don't use it on your normal patients, but for patients that, you know, are motor neurone disease or perhaps Guillain-Barré disease, somebody that have got a little bit of inspiratory effort but not enough to sustain the breath, then this is a really helpful mode. We didn't use it very often. If you tried to tell your patient who was a COPD patient that they had to spend so long in their inspiratory phase, they'll get really dysynchronous with the device and it just won't work, they'll pull it off. So just use it on your specific patients. Our guys were starting to use PCV with asthma, but it didn't really help. I would bring up the PEEP in an asthma patient to sort of try and keep their airways from collapsing shut and try and attack the problem that way. So that's PCV, exactly the same as BiPAP, except for now you control the inspiratory time. Cancel that one. The other mode that you've got is something called average volume assured pressure support. Now with this you'll set a desired tidal volume, you'll set an EPAP and then a minimum IPAP and a maximum IPAP. And the machine will just run through a range of pressure supports until it hits a tidal volume, a desired tidal volume that you've put in. Remember that it's a pressure-driven device, so you're not forcing in 500 mils. You're just adjusting the pressure support until you get an exhalation of 500 mils. It's very, very slow, so it will make pressure changes of a couple of centimetres every couple of minutes. So we didn't ever use it in ED, but for obesity hypoventilation syndrome and for at-home ventilation or for more stable patients up in ICU, it's quite a nice mode. I don't think you'll use it down here, but you know, depends how long you have your patients down here for. So that's that one. Menu is like your TV menu, so you can make the screen bright or light. You can make the alarms very loud or nice and soft. Can't ever turn them off. We went through the mask and port. Is everyone happy with that one? So we would just change, if we changed the mask, just to tell the machine what leak is associated with it, and the same if you changed your exhalation port, which I don't think that you will. Vent info you'll never need, but if someone ever asks for the serial number, then that's where it's kept.
That screen works for all the cars.
Yeah, yep. Screen lock. So now if you had a helpful patient, then they can't make any changes. If you forget how to unlock it, if you hold your finger down, now kids will work this out very easily. It says screen lock, press the tick to unlock. But if it was an elderly confused patient, we had one lady who pulled the device over to herself with her circuit. She made a few changes. You can stop that sort of thing happening. So just press the tick to unlock, and then you'll get your tabs back again. Now standby is a really nice feature as well. If you knew you were getting a patient in, you got a bat phone and you knew that they were already on CPAP or BiPAP, then you can pop it into standby. Did you hear the machine just blew off a little bit of extra gas? Now you can go into your settings. We might put it back into spontaneous timed. You can ask the ambos what they've got their patient on. All you need to do, set all your settings, all you need to do when the patient comes in is just worry about getting the mask on the patient. The patient will take a breath and the therapy will start straight away, so you don't have to worry about fiddling around with the machine. That's about it. And you've got your battery icon there, that'll just count down. If you forget everything, you can press that. Gives you a little bit of information, not heaps, but enough to get you started. And then we'll leave you some little things that are not on here at the moment, just to run through as you turn the device on, and we'll just hang them off the machine and how to set your alarms, etc. Any questions? It just takes a little while to get used to it. It looks like a lot of information, but because everyone's so used to their iPhones now, it tends to be that people pick it up really quickly. This is a big change, that you need to have patient leak. That has to be between 7 to 25 litres. And this will be a little bit of a change for you, that you set your EPAP and your IPAP, not your EPAP and your pressure support.
And it's not above your EPAP. It's not
No.
above your
No.
IPAP's not above your EPAP. It's including.
Yeah. So it's from baseline, it's from 0.
Yeah.
So currently you'd have, if you were setting it at a 6 and a 6, then that's 6 and 12 ones. But it's beautiful. The masks are beautiful. The only thing probably with the masks are much softer. They've got a double membrane here when the gas fills up the mask, and this really just floats on the patient's face. When you put it on, just pull that all the way up to the top, and then the mask will sit just nice and loosely, 90 degrees. It doesn't have to be tight. If the patient's complaining of gas in their eyes, then you just pinch this and the mask will just pull forward.
Is that disposable? Or?
Yeah, they're all disposable.
They look expensive.
Wow.
We've currently used
The air cushion.
cheap. Yes.
And you know, they're fine, but your patients will tend to get more pressure areas. The seal won't be very good. As an example, St. Vinny's, they were doing the same. They were using the air cushion masks, and they're cheap. They are cheap. And the patients wouldn't keep them on at all, so they'd run up to ICU and get these. So whether or not you wanted to do that with ICU, because it will stay with the patient for their whole visit, but you'll find that the therapy is much better tolerated with a mask that's comfortable, and air cushion masks just aren't.
Often though, it's for a brief period of time.
Yeah.
So it's not going to stay on for a long time.
For a long time.
How does that work then with...
So then you just go to menu,
yeah.
mask import, and go to other.
Oh, I see.
And you set the leak yourself, do you? You decide what a reasonable leak is?
Well, now, so you'll still use this disposable exhalation port, so the machine will know what leak is associated with that.
Okay.
But now when you turn it on, see how here we had a patient leak?
Yeah. You'd have to figure that out yourself.
It turns into a total leak.
Right.
So it will be a little bit higher.
Yeah.
Because it's now the leak around the mask as well as the exhalation port.
Right.
The machine doesn't know what it is around the mask anymore. So instead of setting it between 7 to 25 litres, you might have it, say, at 20 litres or 30 litres. So then go back to your pressures and just make sure your patient's hitting your pressures and that they're not uncomfortable. They'll tell you if they're getting gas into their eyes, or if you're feeling an enormous leak, then you just might want to readjust that mask. See how you go, you know, but it does make an enormous difference. And I'm not saying that because I now come from Mayo, I'm saying it from a clinical perspective, that having these masks made patients tolerate NIV in a much better way. They're just comfortable.